Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book from Edward Elgar Publishing. They're an independent private family consultancy of publishers. They produce really excellent, high quality books, often for the academic, certainly the jurisprudential market at the top, but also books for practitioners, sometimes in particular areas, and they have specialised over the years in certain areas, one of which has been IP, intellectual property. And one book that's come to us, which I found very, very interesting, is on private international law, art and cultural heritage. It's been written by Christa Ruud, and as I say, it's published by Elgar. It's available as an Elgar online law book as well, and also an e-book. Now, my wife Elizabeth and I talked of this book. We thought it was very interesting. I'll show it in a moment. And for our title for the review we've written, we said The Theft of Heritage, Cultural Property Issues and the Role of Private International Law. An important, I suspect, and increasing subject area for many people. Now, here's the front of the book there. Nice cover. These are people. This is a cave mural of worshipping persons in a very old part of the world in China. Now, it's Buddhism. It's a Buddhist artifact of some sort. I don't know much about it, but it's an interesting view. There's the back of the book, the spine, and then the back of the book. It's a hardback, and the back of the book itself has quite a detailed index, you can see there. Then, before you get to the index, you've got a lot of bibliographical material, which is nicely included there, reports of various sorts, of course, a lot of books. And if we just go straight to the front of it, you've got various contributors from complete works, but you've got, as I say, a particularly large amount of reference material with a main books area for the bibliography to start with. Then it's broken down into other areas after that. Now, what you've got paragraph numbering in this book, which is quite helpful, chapter headings and so forth, and subheadings. There is a use of footnotes made available, and that links, of course, to the back of the book. But as I say, you've still got the paragraph numbering, so it's not that difficult to find. Christa has gone through this in a great deal of detail, and there's a huge amount of work that's been put into it. It's from the University of Glasgow, and this is the information about the Elgar Online side. There's some information there with reference material to find what you'd be looking for, and then there's the short contents. You can see how it's structured. There are 8 chapters. There's a bibliography at the back, which is very substantial. Then you've got some acknowledgements, obviously the very nice mural at the front. You've then got abbreviations, again running through. That's very helpful, of course. Then there's some case law, not that much, but a little bit of case law. And then you've got some legislation again, to be, which would be expected. Then you launch into the book itself here. The role of private international law in the protection of art and cultural objects. And then an introduction. As I say, you've got a lot of footnotes and so forth. And this is for instance, the word that comes to mind, legal and moral grounds for restitution. I wonder what that might be about. Taking stuff, perhaps in wartime. I'm thinking specifically of Nazi looting, of course, which is still a major problem today. It hasn't gone away. This book has only just come on the market. I'm recording it in the middle of 2015. It's not available in some areas at the moment, but it's a tremendous contribution to this debate on cultural heritage as a whole. And it's something that the world has been very interested in, bearing in mind the wanton destruction in certain parts of the world of very antique sites, actual objects and so forth, just the smashing of it for purely party political reasons, religious reasons, whatever you might want to call them, but wanton destruction in any event, something which is abhorrent, of course, to many people, and anyone who loves history and our culture will find that an abomination. Anyway, what we want to do here is look at what this book is about, because this issue is something that's been around for a long time, and it's one that's not going to go away, and it's one that I think, as we get to become much more of a global village, it's nice to know what the law issues will be in terms of the international stage. So this is what we say. Lawyers know what intellectual property is, obviously, but cultural property is much more challenging to define, and as it happens, generally more difficult to protect under the law. And it's not that long ago, frankly, that IP became such a big subject in its own way. When I first started studying law, we didn't really have intellectual property as such. It was really part of tort and contract, but things have changed dramatically. This book's published by Elgar, and it approaches the subject by exploring the nuances of cultural heritage law, because that's really what this is about, and its relationships with the principles of private international law. The result is a truly formidable work of scholarship research by Krista Rodd, who lectures at Glasgow University in Scotland, and she also holds the title of Professor Extraordinaria at the University of South Africa. Rather courageously, she initially strives for both a definition and an explanation of art as well as cultural objects, and her quite thorough discourse on the subject in the introduction is certainly worth reading. Art and cultural objects, she says, form separate classes of objects that speak to the human condition and mirror the life conditions of individuals and communities. Humans tend to develop a deep sense of personal attachment to antiquities, even though, as she admits, art is notoriously difficult to define. As for cultural objects, these can be understood to mean the physical remains of the past, man-made objects that are of archaeological, historical, prehistorical, artistic, scientific, literary or technical interest. So pretty wide then, isn't it? From here, she then goes on to examine cultural heritage law as a legal framework, quote, that reflects trends and developments of international cultural law and its interactions with other fields of law. It apparently emerged as a new separate category of law about 1990, followed on from the term cultural heritage, officially adopted by UNESCO in 1972. Now, UNESCO being the United Nations Scientific and Cultural Organization. Tragically, of course, these explanations and definitions have become all too topical of late, which I mentioned earlier, in the wake of the desecration of whole archaeological sites and irreplaceable artefacts by the forces of ISIL, IS, whatever you want to call them. This is the fundamental Islamic state people who have taken over large parts of Syria and Iraq. Many of the treasures I've just referred to, as has been discovered, have turned up in legitimate art markets, mainly in the West. And of course the reason for that is that they've been looting and selling them to purchase arms to continue their war and to kill as many people as possible. So you see where the problems are, and the fact they've also destroyed stuff which they don't approve of. Again, they're making judgments and destroying something forever, which again is a tragedy in its own way. Now, the author has more than a few comments to make about the role of the acquisitive art collectors. And of course, we've all seen the films on television and the programmes, and we're well aware of antiques, art collectors and so forth. But this book is looking specifically at the legal issues. And obviously there are, as I'm sure you well know, moral matters that come into this too. Then we get to the almost never-ending, virtually insoluble problem of Nazi-looted spoliation, is the term used here. This is Nazi-looted art. It still hasn't been sorted out. Much of the book focuses on this topic, and I'm very glad they do, because it still hasn't been all properly dealt with. It's a matter that the Swiss authorities should be ashamed of themselves over, but nothing much has been done, and it means that until we get more of these books and more publicity and people realise what has gone on and that people have quite wrongly stolen other people's property and killed them in the process, it's time that we try to right a few of these wrongs, and I hope this book goes some way to at least assist there, and I'm sure that was part of her intention when Miss Rood wrote this book. it's certainly illustrative, of course, of the tangled web of problems that still emerge in the fight for justice on this issue, and other instances of stolen art and cultural treasures. It's not as though history hasn't been littered with this before, but I'm afraid it's a fact of life and we have to deal with it. That's why, if we can, we want to try and protect, certainly by getting agreements, treaties and all the other things, protect stuff for the future. It's an understatement then to say that this is an international problem that spans any number of jurisdictions, a fact that obviously compounds the inherent difficulties. But one day we've got to sit down and talk about it. The trouble is, if we don't, more damage is done, we lose things, but I'm afraid that's just the way the human condition goes, but we can do our best. The book therefore examines in detail such matters as restitution, the resulting complexities introduced by private international law, the protection and safeguarding of heritage, the settlement of claims to art and heritage, and ultimately the potential of private international law to settle such claims. And also mentioned by the author are those instances where restitution is contentious, inappropriate, or unlikely to succeed. And there are going to be those cases as well, because frankly there just isn't the evidence to prove ownership. And we have it even in the common law. We've had these problems over the centuries, so it's nothing new. It's just that we do try to bring some common sense where we can to bear. Let me conclude by saying, as I've indicated, the book has extensive footnoting and cases from at least 14 countries. It's wide-ranging and it's a detailed survey which makes it an important contribution to the growing body of literature and analysis surrounding what is a difficult and topical subject. The bibliography has over 30 pages indicating how much work has been put into this and how much commentary there is, in fact even now in 2015, on the subject matter. International lawyers as well as policymakers everywhere should consider this book an essential purchase, and the publication date is 2015. As I've said, it came out earlier in 2015. Not everybody's got it yet, and I'm recording this in June 2015. There's the book again, hardback, the spine and back there, opening it in the middle. Again, you can see this is adjudication authority and its limits, looking at where we're going. A lot of detail, because I think at the end of the day, if we're going to get anywhere with this, you do have to have the detail and factual backing. This is dealing again with Hitler. Decided claims for restitution of Nazi spoliated art. That's a title, a huge amount of information. And it wouldn't be nice to say that eventually there will be some sort of closure on this, but it's a long way off, I think, even now. There's the bibliography. And again, right at the back, you do have quite a detailed index. And one thing I would say, it's not just the Nazis. Perhaps Mr. Putin might think about how much stuff they've got stuffed away in the Kremlin at the moment as well, because there's an awful lot of stuff that has been taken. And it's not for the Brits to start saying, well, they're all totally coming to this with clean hands themselves, because there are issues even in this country about it. But the fact is, we've got to start somewhere. And I think most people would agree that even if you are going to have a difficulty over the provenance of the actual title to the goods, what you've got to have is the protection of the goods so they're not destroyed. That seems to me to be common sense for any human being. And that, of course, is where the problem starts with people like certain types of individual who just want to go around and destroy things for the sake of it, because they don't like what they stand for, or it's idolatry, or it's some excuse is given for the reason why it must be destroyed. Anyway, I've got an emotive subject brewing here for, I hope, everybody. I'd like to thank Krista Root very much indeed for what is an excellent book. I was quite moved by it, because I feel quite passionately that the people who suffered as a result of having all their property taken away are still, some of them are still suffering, when in fact at the end of the day we could have done something about that in terms of restitution. This book goes some way to help, so thank you and good luck. Hope it comes out in another edition one of these days, and we might get some success stories out of it too. Bye bye.